everyone. We're here today with Francesca Montecone, a PhD student here at the University of Bologna. She's going to talk about digitalization and how this can improve your urban agriculture projects. And I'm happy to welcome you here, and thank you, Francesca, for accepting our invitation. And please, I'll leave you the floor to you now, so you can introduce yourself a little bit and talk more about your research and how this could help our students to make the urban farming projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I'm going to share the screen. Yes. Can you see it? It's always maybe I close this so it doesn't show in the presentation. So, hi, hello everyone. As Michele said, I'm a PhD student at the University of Bologna, and today I'm going to talk about digital tools for urban agriculture. And the reason why this presentation has been included in your in the series of seminars that you are following is that in the evaluation criteria of the project there is elements of innovation. So both for the project and the video, you'll find that elements of innovation are one of the focuses, one of the criteria that will be used for evaluating your project. And we know innovation can mean many things, but you might consider adding a digital tool to your project in light of this criteria. And digital tools are many, as we will see during the presentation. And so I'm going to help you and probably give you a bit of some ideas about which kind of innovation you could add. So the reason why I'm doing this presentation is because in the context of the project Foodie, that you can find the link there, I did a research on digital technologies for purchasing and consumption with a specific focus on urban and regional agri-food systems. And so today I'm going to talk a bit about the results of this research, but also about another research that we did that's not published yet, so I cannot show it yet. The results of this research were very interesting for possible developments of digital innovation tools. So we'll start with a few examples of digital tools that you can maybe find interesting, and maybe you will add to your project to make it more innovative. So first of all, there are platforms. So in today's presentation, I have to say first, we're going to focus basically on the consumer side of the supply chain. So digitalization can be used in every step of the food chain and can be part of many solutions of the problems that the current food system is facing, but now today we're only going to focus on the consumer side of things, so all the digital tools that allow for purchasing and consumption of food products. So this is definitely something that has grown in recent years, especially after the pandemic and the consequent lockdowns, where we had to stay at home and use digital tools to make our online grocery shopping. And so you can see some data here. So e-commerce in the food sector grew in percentage in Europe since 2020 of almost 30%, which is clearly a lot, and reached a turnover of 56 billion euros in 2020. So it's a big thing, it's growing, so it's definitely something that you may think adding to your urban farm project. So here's the example of platforms in the agri-food sector. So we have, first of all, the food assembly, which in Italian is called l'alveare che dice sì. You may have heard of it. So it's an online farmers market that's been set up in France in 2010. And basically what it does is helping farmers to sell their products directly to consumers without having to go through any middleman or retailer or supermarket or whatever. It's quite widespread now after 10 years. So there are branches all over Europe, in Italy and Spain and Germany. And what it does is basically it creates a community around food. So anyone can set up a food assembly and can set up this farmer market that will go on in their local neighborhood. And so consumers can place order online, and then they can collect their orders at the farmers market. So this is an interesting project because it really puts in contact producers and consumers, and it's very local. So it's done at local level, but it's really interesting to see how these kind of projects are developing and growing, and there are many more. This is just an example that we found in our research. A similar one, it's called the Open Food Network. It's also a global project. There are branches in the US, in Canada, in Australia, in the UK, and in Spain as well. And the difference between the food assembly is that the Open Food Network is an open source software. So the idea is quite similar, so it puts in contact producers and consumers. But in this case, producers will upload their own products to the platform in a way that will allow them to have more control on what they sell. And since it's an open source platform, what happens is basically it's more easy for producers to be in contact with the developers of the platform. And what they will do is that they can ask to the developers if they want any feature that is not there yet, if they want an upgrade, an update of some sort. So it will allow producers to have much more control on what they do or what they use to sell. And we found in our research that regional supply chain definitely benefit from higher coordination that is allowed by the platform, because you know who's there in your area, in your local area, and you know how what they sell and how, and you can create much more connections. A third example and last example of platforms is SourceMap. We found this mentioned in one of the articles we analyzed. And SourceMap is helping consumers and companies to trace products to the source. So it's a bit different from the first two examples. So we're basically talking about more global supply chains, while in the first, for example, it was more about a very local supply chain. So in this case, it's a global supply chain when companies are not really aware of every bit of it. So this platform, this software, is basically helping them to visualize their supply chain and track and trace all the products and being able to show them to the final user, to the final consumer. And so, for example, we found in the research that SourceMap is used, for example, by some restaurants to show the kilometers that their food had traveled. So it's really interesting to see how this kind of softwares have been used by restaurants or producers to show customers what they do. A second example of digital tools are apps. So basically, apps are growing as well as platforms. So the number of mobile phone users was 3.6 billion people in 2020, and about more than 200 billion apps were downloaded. And all the apps that are available in the App Store, 3.7 are in the food and drink category. So it is definitely something that is growing as well, and something that needs to be given attention if you want to do something in the innovation area. So what is interesting is that apps provide consumer with an accessible and convenient way to get a variety of products very easily, compared to traditional purchases where everything is definitely more slow. So the development of apps is definitely changes how consumers and brands interact among each other. So it's really important from a marketing point of view as well to take into account that these digital tools are there. So if you want to add an app to your project, to your urban farm project, here's a few things that you have to keep in mind. So first of all, there are a few questions, of course, that you have to ask yourself, and it will be really interesting to see them in the final project. So first of all, I think you have to ask yourself, what are the app's popular features? So of all the apps, there are many apps in the food and drink category, as we've seen before, right now, that are available in the market. So what are their features? So what do they do? What are the most successful apps doing for consumers? This is the first thing that you need to analyze if you want to add an app to your project. And I'll give you some sort of answer to this at the end, so you don't really have to do all the research about this. The second and third questions are more about consumers' needs. So of all these things that are there in the market, what are consumers liking? What do people like of the apps that they can use? And third, linking the above. So what is there, but what is your specific target liking? So especially if you're doing your project in an area where you live, so if you live in Bologna, for example, and you're doing your project on Le Terre, then definitely it's probably worth asking your target what apps they like, what they will need, what's not there yet that you could add with your projects. So I'm going to give you a few results, as I said, of our research that could be a possible source of inspiration for you. So we basically asked ourselves what I was saying before. So what are the features of the food and of the agri-food apps that are now available to users, and what is the consumer's perception of such apps? So our research aim was comparing the two and try to figure out if the apps currently available are in line with consumers' needs. So what we did was basically, first of all, analyzing the major features that are there in the apps that are available, and then we ran a questionnaire to identify consumers' perceived barriers and drivers for agri-food purchasing online. And then we compared the two to see if they match it. So first of all, the methodology that we used for the analysis of the apps was basically using a few categories. So first of all, we divided the apps in general info, apps aim, type of pipeline, and final apps users to have an idea of which kind of apps we found. And then we also use a theoretical framework. And I think this could be really interesting if you think of developing, of adding an app proposal. I'm not saying you have to develop an app to add to your urban farm project, but definitely saying that an app will be developed and give a bit of background and context will definitely help your project in terms of scoring well. So I think this theoretical framework will be really helpful, because you'll see how all these features are available now in the market. So first of all, there is customization. So consumers really like the fact that they can have an app that is in a way adapted to their needs. So there's information. So depending on what consumers like, you might give them different kind of information. Then you have sustainability feedback, which is really interesting. We'll go more in depth about that later. Then there's all the things about commitment, which is gamification, discount, reminders. So all the things that your app could do to increase the engagement of the consumer. And then the community part. So it's basically more about the creation of a community, the interactions. So if you have, for example, ratings or suggestions or comments from other users, these are all things that make people like your app more, and that you could think of adding if it's feasible in your project. And then last but also important, it's the design. So how easy it is to use, if it's consistent, if it has search button by categories or ingredient or whatever. So these are all kinds of things that you could think of adding to the app if it's something that your target might like. So here's a few results as well from our sample. So we analyzed 93 apps that we found and the App Store or Google Play Store as well. So we analyze, first of all, as I said, the general information and the app objective. So as you can see here, the main app objective was selling and buying food. So this is something that if you add that in your project, it's definitely something that could be of use to consumers, and it's something that it's already there in a way, but you could do it in a different way that is still innovative. And it's interesting that one of the main things is also supporting local producers and local community. And both the locations of the project that you have to work on are definitely very well located in the local community. So that could definitely be something that you could think about. So we're going to focus on a few objectives here to see a few examples of apps that are already there. It could be an inspiration for you. So mapping is definitely a feature that is quite common. It's the second most common feature. Is basically present in almost all of these apps. It includes geolocalization and a list of filters. For example, there's Osteria d'Italia 2020, but there are many others, Do Local, Buy Fresh, Buy Local. So there are plenty of apps that use mapping to basically give an idea of what's out there and where you can find it. So it's very important that it's something that's near where you live. So mapping is definitely something that will help in that. Another very popular feature is delivering food. So delivery apps are definitely the most downloaded in the food and drink category, especially during COVID pandemic. There's really seen quite a boom. Delivery platforms basically helped restaurants, agribusiness, whatever food business to stay alive during the pandemic. And so here you can see a few logos of one of the popular ones. Swiggy, for example, is an Indian app that has also helped restaurants to start working again after COVID. So they gave appropriate hygiene standards, and so they were really helpful also in users control, and also delivery apps are very diverse. So it could be, for example, Just Eat, that you probably all know, but also Local to You, which is a much smaller one, and it's based in Bologna. So the things that this delivery app could sell are the most diverse, so from fresh agri-food and vegetables, from fresh fruit and vegetables to ready-made meals from restaurants. But apps can also give travel information. So here's a few screenshots, for example, from Traveling Spoon, which is an app that gives, for example, tips or hints about where to go when you are away. So you could have, for example, a restaurant's recommendation or cooking classes or market visits with local people. So if you wish to give a more international or touristic aspect to your project, you could definitely think about adding this kind of app. And finally, probably the one that is more interesting for you, so it's urban agriculture apps. So these two are two Indian apps, Parmesan and Croft. And I think this could be very interesting to add in your projects, because what these apps do is basically allowing users to rent a small piece of land near where they live, so in urban areas. And what they can do is basically, thanks to cameras that are all around the field, they can monitor and grow fruit and vegetable under the supervision of the farmer. So they can both go to the farm and help the farmer growing their small piece of land, or they can also monitor it from home and order the fruits and vegetables when they're ready. So it's really interesting because it really puts in contact urban inhabitants with the farmers nearby, so they can both look after their own land and eat the fruit and vegetables that they grow with the help of the farmer. So it definitely makes food something more near at that they can feel they have control over. So I think especially this one will be very much fitting in your urban farm projects. I'm now going to give you a few results of our research that could help give you some inspiration for what kind of apps are there and what other apps still need to be developed, and maybe you could fill that gap if you have the capacity in your group. So definitely app personalization is something that is very well liked by consumers, and it's present in 67% of apps. While, for example, sustainability feedback, which could be really interesting, both nutritional and environmental, so both in terms of carbon footprint or calories intake or whatever, it's something that's not really there at the moment. So you cannot, like consumers cannot really know what is the carbon footprint or the environmental footprint of the food they eat. It's obviously something that is very difficult to calculate, so that's probably why it's not there yet. But it's also interesting that it's like an area of possible growth, and it's definitely something that is going to grow in the next few years because there is obviously much consumer demand about it, and so that gap will be filled. What we can do is that it has to be filled in a good way. So, and also commitment, as you can see, it's quite present, probably not enough, so not many apps will be used in the long term. So there's also something that could be worked on. And then obviously we have the community bit, so it's very important to create a community around the use of apps and to make people feel that they're not only alone in front of their computer. So in terms of information, information in different apps can be very different. So you could have, for example, recipes, or you could have producers or restaurateur stories. So here you can see a few apps that you can go and check to have some more inspiration. So both in terms of results and in terms of stories of producers. Other information could be the detail about the products, so not only about the producers. As you can see here, there's a screenshot from Farm Job, and this is all story of the baker and how they started their bakery and all the background. But you can also have like the story of the products sold. Then again, environmental feedback. There are a few apps that actually give environmental feedback, but they're quite limited in number. So here's an example. So you have, for example, this is a screenshot from Seafood Watch. So you can have all this data on sustainable fishing methods. So if the fish you're eating is sustainable, if it's in extinction, or but it's general information. It's not specific about the one that you choose, but it's generally about species. So that's a bit easier to do, but it's also not so detailed. So then there are other apps of this kind. So for example, Fresh and Local also incorporates a greenometer that calculates food miles of the agri-food products that are purchased by the users. So this is a bit more specific, but it's also very difficult to calculate, and there are not many products on it. So these are all the apps that we analyzed. And the second step of our research was trying to find what consumers like. So for example, again, if you live near the place of the project you want to do, so if you live in Bologna and you're doing La Serra, for example, then it could be good to have to do a questionnaire of the people who are there. It's always very, very busy, very crowded, so you could definitely be able to spread a questionnaire there and find a few answers to give a direction to your project. So, and for example, and a tip could be interesting to give you is to use a QR code to share the questionnaire if you think of doing one. It could be really short, but it will really give a big validation to your project, showing that you've really done all of this background work, trying to know what the target of your project wants. So definitely use a QR code and just put a few print it and just attach it all over the place. So people will definitely like screenshot it and answer while they're maybe queuing to be served or something similar. So that could be a good way to share that. Anyways, we did our questionnaire, and here you can find some inspirations for the questions, but also some data on the answers that could be helpful. So we did the questionnaire with divided in 3 sections. So first of all, we asked what are the drivers and barriers of urban food purchasing. Then the second one was about drivers and barriers of online food purchasing, and the third was about apps features. So what they like, what they do not like. And here you can find a few preliminary results. So in terms of drivers for buying from our urban and cultural initiatives, these are the main ones. So the most popular one was buying fresh and seasonal food. So it's definitely something that you could focus on if you think about doing an app or a platform. So people mainly want from urban agriculture, mainly want freshness and seasonality that they cannot find maybe in supermarkets or any other store. It's also interesting that the second one was community creation. So people were really interested in creating a community beyond the digital tools. So knowing that going there they can find like-minded people that really value the same thing that they value and all that. The emotional value of it, which is I think really linked to the community creation, it's really important. So people buy from urban and cultural initiatives because maybe they can go there with their kids and show the kids how food is produced. Maybe they have some animals they can play with, or like having an experience is very important for consumers. So there's also something to keep in mind. And then there's obviously the economic aspects. So it's consumers believe that urban and cultural products are cheaper. So and it's a better value for money. So this is also something that you could think of focusing on, and then also that the food is more healthy, which goes back to the first point of fresh and seasonal food. But on the second step, we asked what are the barriers and the drivers of online food shopping. So here you can find a few examples. So in terms of barriers, we had bad shopping experience. So which is, I think it's really linked to being tech and savvy. So people that maybe are not really comfortable using a computer or a mobile phone, thinking about older people, for example. In that case, it's very difficult for them to do online shopping because obviously they're not very familiar with it, and they can definitely go for the habit of going to the supermarket or the local shop by themselves and not doing that online. And some people also pointed out that it's less convenient. So it's food is more expensive, so they're not going to buy online. They prefer going to do their grocery shopping in person. In terms of drivers, on the other hand, we had good variety of products. So it's really it's quite common that consumers believe that in terms of online food shopping, there's more choice. So if you have more choice, then you're more willing to go and buy somewhere. So good variety was definitely one of the main points. And then obviously also buying something that was more sustainable, more ethical, so they can choose maybe to buy from a crop that is more far away from them, but it's more sustainable, and so they they believe to have done more ethical shopping. So that's definitely one of the drivers, and also obviously saving time and money. So in terms of going to the supermarket, going to the shop, maybe go to different shops to buy different foods, while if you buy online, it's all there. So saving time is definitely one of the main drivers, because obviously it's much more fast and easy to buy there. In terms of apps features, we asked also what information available on apps would motivate you to use it, and really interestingly, food waste was on the top of this question. So it was definitely the most popular thing that people wanted from an app, and it's probably one of the things that they've seen more, because there are many apps on food waste. So this is probably one of the reasons for answering this, and definitely more information on seasonal organic food, sustainability practices. That's also what we said before about it. It's really interesting also to point out that there's a reward system for sustainable food lifestyle, which is the fourth most popular information. So again, as we said at the beginning, there's not much feedback in terms of sustainable behaviors on apps that are present nowadays in the market, because again, it's a difficult thing to do, but consumers are really very interested in this. So it could be interesting to add that aspects too. So we came up with a few preliminary conclusions, trying to match what's there in the apps and what consumers like, and we said this more or less. So the drivers of buying from peri-urban initiatives was fresh and local food, but only 11% of the apps that we analyzed were supporting local producers and the local community. So it's definitely something that could be expanded more. And then here again, environmental feedback and measures of user behavior. It's quite something that consumers like, so it's a fourth, but here it's present only in 8% of apps. So a few things here. Information on promotion, it's quite interesting for consumers, but not so much. So it's present only in 40% of apps. So that's quite a good match. And here's a few final remarks. So it's interesting to see that there is a growing interest among stakeholders in the agri-food supply chain in innovative and technological approaches to the problem of the food system. So I think it's really interesting if you develop something like that to take into account all the stakeholders that will be involved. So innovation and digitalization is something that it's important for the whole supply chain. So keep that in mind if you think of adding a platform or an app to your project. Make a list of stakeholders that you want to be involved, or that you already involved in the development of it. So apps can also be a very valuable tool in terms of decreasing the asymmetry of information that is present nowadays in the agri-food sector. And this is something that has really good value in terms of developing a new project as well. And finally, it's important to keep in mind that digital technologies are not positive or negative by themselves, but they change their value in terms based on the facts of what they carry, so based on the content that they provide to people. So that's it. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you very much. That was very thorough and interesting. I think it's also a new way to relate, the digitalization processes and apps and softwares with something that it's purely agriculture and in the urban agriculture. So I think there's a strong link in the two topics. As well, I think when we're talking about so few apps dealing with the environmental issues because of the difficulties in finding, the sustainable values and environmental values, I guess that when you integrate a food app with urban agriculture processes and projects, you can actually measure, for example, the impact of your product over the whole food chain system. So maybe if you can develop an app that at least tracks your production, that could also help with help people understanding the impact of food production in cities, and maybe foster and promote different ways to see and perceive how food is produced. So I think that's really interesting, and maybe it could also be something that students can try and develop in their project. So I think it was really like a good, very helpful presentation. Do you think? And it was also really focused on the UrbanFarm student challenge as well. So you've given some tips to the students that surely they can be useful for them. So from this point of view, do you think that maybe there could be, this digitalization apps, these systems, they also put together like different sphere of the different dimensions of the sustainability. So not only the food production or the environmental spheres, but also the economic and social dimensions of sustainability in the urban agricultural projects. And if they can do that, how can they, if they do that, how can they develop these connections? How could they help at least describing these connections between all the spheres of sustainability in urban agricultural projects?
Yeah, in terms of the social and economic aspects, for example, for the social aspects, some from the results, you could see that basically the apps that were allowing people to have also like the creation of a community, or also have in-person contact with other people buying from the producers. So the farmers market goes from online to in person for collecting, for example, for the food assembly. So the social aspect is definitely given by the community creation, I think. So when you start something online, but then you bring that community alive in the real world. So you go from online to offline. I think this digitalization can really help in starting creating the community, and then you can bring it offline as well. So that's for the social part. In terms of the economic part, definitely it's something that has really, the digitalization has definitely helped like many small producers or small restaurants to stay alive during the pandemic. So we've seen how important this kind of tools are also from an economic point of view, and definitely in urban agriculture as well. Digitalization can help reach a higher number of consumers, so definitely having more sales and more people that are aware of the existence of urban agriculture initiatives. It's really helpful also on that aspects.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a crucial point to understand that also this digitalization process should help people to get out of their or get their eyes off their phone and then go, especially in urban agricultural projects, and go and live the community that these projects are actually fostering. Elisa, you have a question?
You mean like more practical ways? Well, I think I think the example of the food assembly is probably the best one. So yeah, like besides all the reviews and comments, which is very helpful because we know now that consumers are like every time. Well, I also do it. Like every time I buy something, I'll go and see the reviews online. So that's definitely one big point. But definitely, yeah, I think the point of the food, the example of the food assembly is probably the best one in this area. So you do your shopping online. So you choose your products with your own time. You do it online whenever you want from the comfort of your house and whatever. But then you go and collect the products in person. So in a farmer's market that really exists in your neighborhood. So that's definitely something that brings it from online to offline in a way that is really effective. So you do your shopping online, but you also know the producers because you go there and collect the products that you bought for the week. So I think it's a good way of combining the two.
Okay. Thank you, Francesca. I have no more questions. As I said before, your presentation was very thorough, and we really enjoyed it. And thank you for sharing with the students. I think it would be really helpful for them to try and set maybe an app to add to their projects. It would be really interesting to see what their ideas and what will come up out of this. So thank you, Francesca, again, and thank you, Lisa, for being here. Thank you, everybody. See you at the next rendezvous. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.